Edge to it, unfortunately. I think going through it, right?
No, it's already there. And you took it out. These days, I just have to.
It was just a few weeks ago that I said to Doc, oh, we haven't seen the cats for so long. We really need to get together. Yeah, no, sure. Well, I mean, that was a consideration.
It's been such strange
But this is the first time that we've actually been to a memorial. So many of our friends have died and there's been nothing. They've been out of today, somebody's been nothing. So we didn't get a chance to say goodbye. Yeah. We went one for Moira, yeah. It was interesting. Yes, we had. It's not connected.
Can you record?
Yeah, I suppose so. We've got to go through this ritual.
Lovely.
Doesn't matter. You can
That's me, and that's Hannah. It's only the three.
Charles, at the moment I've just got it recording on my webcam on my laptop. It's coming out quite a bit smaller, not a full screen.
Okay, but I just walked in now, so I should be coming. There's quite a delayed lag. Yeah, by quite a bit actually. Probably about 10 seconds. Are you getting a full screen? Can you see it nice and clear? Because on my screen it's quite reduced.
It's going back a while.
Okay. And sound? And yes, yeah. I'm just using my laptop webcam now. I couldn't get it to my phone, unfortunately, so it's not going to be as good as it should. Yeah, I don't know how to change that. Okay, cool. Thanks, eh? Is that on the OBS software or actually on YouTube? I presume. How do I actually center it on the screen?
So there's Russell first,
It's in storage.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I'm pleased about that. That's such a nice thing. But hopefully it's some dry season.
Okay, so everything was lined up and everything.
Yeah, I know, we're good.
Good morning all. Good morning on this lovely sun-filled spring day. On behalf of Karen and families, welcome to Michael, Mike, Mickey, Clark's celebration of his life. The order of this wonderful celebration will be one of tributes from friends and family. Before we start on that journey, a few housekeeping things. Toilets, ladies' toilets are here. Nondescript toilets around the corner. The reason why I say that is, I don't know if any of you saw the news item yesterday from the MCC. We no longer have batsmen, we no longer have fieldsmen. We have batters and fielders. So it's quite apt that the toilet around the corner there, they heard that and they've actually taken the male sign down. So now we've just got a toilet and a female toilet. So anyway, please, we are in COVID. Please try and keep your social distancing, sanitize where possible, and mask up if you feel so that you need to. So we've got the toilet sorted, we've got COVID. One more thing, if you haven't already, please turn off your sound for your cell phones, because where I come from in the construction industry, if a cell phone rings during a meeting, boy, you have to buy a round of drinks. Right, with that said, can I ask Carl to put on Maureen's eulogy?
Hello, I'm Maureen, Mike's sister. I'm speaking on behalf of my sister Joan and her husband Derek, as well as for my husband John and our children John and Claire. Our heartfelt condolences to Karen, to all of the children and partners, and to all of the grandchildren. This is such a poignant occasion, losing Mike just after the passing of our brother David 3 months ago. Mike was the eldest of the 4 children, born in consecutive years. He was our fearless leader, forging the way for the rest of us. He helped us when he could. I've seen a picture of us. He was pushing me on a swing probably when I was about 2. I remember him reading to us when he was 5. And once he started school, our mother sat us around the kitchen table doing homework together. Mike had real homework, the rest of us learning along with him or doing colouring assignments. By the time Joan was 5, she had already done so much homework she hardly needed to just start school. She could have slotted into the 2nd or 3rd year very easily. Mike broke his arm falling out of a tree when he was about 5-6 years old. Mum told us he woke himself several times at night, clonking himself on the head. While he had the cast, he and David went out to investigate a nearby road working job. It was lunchtime, so the site was quiet. David got too close while inspecting a barrel of warm tar and he fell in. Mike was able to grab David by the neck, cast and all, and yell for help, saving Dave's life. The four of us were quite often sent to the store down the hill to get bread. Mike would shepherd us there safely. Mom soon learned to give us enough money for 1.5 loaves of bread, as we would eat at least half the loaf while walking back home. When Mike got the first bicycle, he rode it proudly around our big yard. Naturally, Dave had to have a ride too, and I was determined not to be left out. Joan was at a disadvantage as she couldn't reach the pedals, so she rode standing up. Most of our activities as children were monitored by the egg timer, so we all had turns and learned to share. I remember many times the cluster of kids around the egg timer was more appealing than the turn with a new item. Mike was happiest exploring the wild bush nearby and leading us on adventures, and some of those were a bit scary. He took us down the storm sewers. Durban did not have waterborne sewage, so it wasn't a stinky experience, and he delighted in addressing passers-by in ghostly voices. He insisted the rats wouldn't bite us, and no one ever was bitten. He took the rest of us and some of the neighborhood kids to explore the mile-long drainage tunnel from the swamp area in the valley out to the beach. There were heavy steel gates closing the tunnel both ends, but somehow he was able to get us in. We could see the tiny dot of light at the far end. We had to crawl, and I discovered I was claustrophobic that day and had to back the kids behind me out of the tunnel to their vocal dismay. He also led outings to the beach. Sometimes we went down the hill to Crossways and walked through the Martingulu trees and the dunes to reach the sea. It was not a kid-friendly beach, so we were forbidden to swim there, but did enjoy the sand and eating the ripe red fruit. The swimming beaches were a much longer walk from home, but we'd trek along quite often in the summer. Brighton Beach had some lovely rock pools, as well as a saltwater swimming pool. At high tide, the huge waves would break thunderously on the seawall and create waves in the pool. One king tide, the waves were so big they broke right over the pool. It was quite dangerous as small kids were being swept off their feet, even standing on the land side of the pool. I remember my foot being grabbed by a lifeguard as I was headed over the side, and Mike working feverishly to gather us all and then rushing us back to dry sand as the breaking waves retreated. Mike went through a stage of active snake collecting. He would return home with a snake just about every attempt. Mom would call the world-renowned snake park in Durban. She would describe the snake that Mike had brought home, and they would often suggest that Mike put the snake carefully into a secured box and bring it to the park. He would catch 2 buses each way and usually return with some huger specimen, while the park kept whichever venomous snake he had captured. He kept his snakes in an old aquarium, with air holes in the lid, which was securely weighted with bricks. Joan reminded me of the time one of his snakes was infested with bird lice. Mike carefully covered the snake's head and sprayed the body with Piagra. I had to look this up on Google. It was an insecticide developed in the 1930s, a mixture of pyrethrins and kerosene. Well, the lice promptly moved up to the snake's head, so Mike then sprayed the head too. It killed the lice and, unfortunately, the snake. Mom did not like snakes, but one evening when she was the only person at home, she heard a crash from the boys' room. She went to investigate and found 6 big snakes making their way up the passage. She bravely fetched a broom and managed to corral the snakes and got them back into the aquarium. She added extra bricks on top. She told me she didn't want to disappoint Mike. He determined that his snakes had all gathered on one side of the tank and had overbalanced the aquarium. He decided they needed freedom, so he took them all back into the bush and released them. As Sea Scouts, Mike and Dave were interested in boats and sea life. They were given the opportunity to go down the coast in a cargo ship from Durban to Cape Town and back. Mike told me recently, while I was putting together the eulogy for David, that they'd had a great time. They bonded with the cook, who was always ready to feed them at all hours, and he shared some recipes with the boys. Michael recalled fishing off the stern of the ship with some of the sailors. He also recounted the trip he and David took up Table Mountain. They found a trail up a canyon to the top of the mountain, enjoyed the scramble as well as exploring the top of the mountain. They lost track of time and the famous tablecloth of fog rolled in. They had some difficulty. A spoonful of the caramelized condensed milk when he opened his boxes, as the tin would be emptied by the time it came round to him again. While in the Navy, he was in a parade in Durban when his unit was getting the freedom of the city. I went into town to see him. There was a big band and crowds watching, but he managed to spot me as he was marching by in dress blues and a peaked cap low over his brow. I think I recall swords too. It was all very solemn, but he managed to wink as he went past. Mark and Karen came to visit us in California in the 90s. It was December, so our winter. It was an exciting visit and our whole family enjoyed the time we spent together. John took them up Mount Diablo, our 4,000-foot peak nearby. It has panoramic 360 views, but they weren't very keen to enjoy the vistas that day as there was a ferocious 70 miles an hour wind blowing. John, an avid sailor, was delighted and stood out in the full wind to experience it. He recalls standing with his arms spread wide, shouting to them how great it was, and saw Mark and Karen huddled behind a narrow post for some shelter. They came out on San Francisco Bay with us on a friend's sailboat. Mark was keen to take the wheel, while Karen sat behind the protective Dodger. I was a bit worried about Mark after a long stint and asked if he'd like to come out of the wind and warm up. His lips were blue and he gasped out that he'd like to, but his hands were frozen to the wheel, so he had to stay out. Mark and Karen were keen to visit LA and to see Disneyland. They planned to take our parents. Unfortunately, Mark had forgotten his driver's license, and our father was not keen to drive that far. Ever resourceful, Mark got them all tickets for the Greyhound bus. It was a real bonding experience, as that bus stops in Chowchilla, home of a federal prison. Newly released prisoners who boarded the bus spent time discussing how to stay out of trouble or how to avoid their parole officers, while family members who'd been visiting loved ones in prison cried and bemoaned how much longer they would be visiting Chowchilla. The trip to Disneyland paled in the light of the bus adventures. Mark came out again in 2011 for our mother's 90th birthday. It was a grand family affair with lots of our friends as well. Mark spent some happy time catching up with all our family members as well as with Dave and Dee, Kendra, Kathy, Warren and Jack. One of our friends spent years with Henkel formulating glues, so, pun intended, Mark and Bill each bonded over discussions of glues. John and I visited South Africa in 2014. We spent some excellent time with Mark and Karen. We went down the south coast to visit our Uncle Charles, as well as touring around Oroby Gorge. We wished we'd had time to try that zip line. We spent the night with Mark and Karen and enjoyed the amazing Diwali fireworks. We visited in 2016 again, saw Uncle Charles, and enjoyed the grand family luncheon Mark and Karen hosted. It was a wonderful time, getting to see the nephews and nieces and to meet their partners and children. Mark was a warm and friendly person. He, like our mother, never met a stranger. He made a point in keeping in touch with me, always remembering my birthday and sending Christmas messages. He was a wonderful brother, a dearly loved husband and father, a hands-on grandfather, and a good friend to many. Mark will be very sadly missed, but never forgotten. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen, for that trip down memory lane. We now come to a friend of Mike's, Frank Beaton, old friend, goes back many years. Frank.
Thanks, Dave. Notice the big print. Good morning, everybody. First of all, many thanks to the Clark family for arranging this gathering and giving us an opportunity to pay tribute to our dear friend Mike. I would also like to take this opportunity to express my sincere condolences and those of our former classmates to the family on the earlier loss of David, who we all knew in America. Life sometimes has strange ways of closing the loops in our personal histories. Back in 2011, Mike's daughter Sandy married Carl Grossman, who happens to be a first cousin to my wife Di. At the time, we were living in Johannesburg, so we were unable to attend their wedding. However, soon afterwards, we visited Carl and Sandy in Hillcrest, and in conversation, Sandy asked me which high school I had attended. On being told that it was Grosvenor Boys High on the Bluff, she then asked if I knew Derek Harbison. I replied in the positive. So she then asked if I knew her dad. What was his name, I asked, and she replied, Mike Clark. So I said, oh, Mickey Clark. She almost fell off her chair. I don't think she'd ever heard her father referred to in those terms before, but as Derek said earlier, he was indeed Mickey Clark to us. I then explained that Mike and I had been in the same class from Standard 7 to Matric, and that I had also briefly encountered him during the 1970s when he was doing business with my uncle's shoe component factory in Red Hill. And we heard about adhesives. He was in the adhesive business at that time. As it turned out, this connection to Mike turned out very handy when I arranged the 50th anniversary reunion of our Matric class in 2013. And Mike and Karen were able to attend and reconnect with more of our classmates, many of whom had been out of touch for half a century. Since then, we have retired and returned to Durban, held further get-togethers for our cohort, and attended some Grossman family gatherings at which Mike and Karen and Derek and Joan were present. My memories of Mike are of him being the gentleman of our somewhat rowdy class, softly spoken, always smiling and seeing the humour in situations. He famously told his family that the F he obtained in some subject tests and exams stood for fabulous and was nothing to cause concern. I was also informed by our classmate Nolan Goldstone that Mike had enjoyed distinguished membership of the Sea Scout movement, gaining Springbok Scout status in that organisation. Unfortunately, events in our recent history have not allowed sufficient opportunities for socialising, and we are left with regret for not having seen enough of Mike and Karen over the past 2 years. We will sincerely miss him, although we are thankful that we had the opportunity to reconnect recently and share recollections from the good old days. Rest in peace, Mike. You were definitely one of the good guys. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Frank. I think you might have left out a few telling stories in Standard 7C, but we won't go there. We won't go. Can I now call on Kirsten to say a pun?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kirsten. I am Mike's third daughter. I have just got a message to read from my partner in Cape Town, who could not be here with us today, and then I have something I wanted to read from my father. This is from Ravi. So in the short time that I knew Mike, I never once saw him angry or aggressive. He was always a gentleman. The Christmas family lunches spent with him and Karen were always warm and joyful. He was truly a gentle giant, and I always felt proud to be part of the family and regarded him as my father-in-law. He openly accepted me with all my flaws and my history and never once questioned me. Let's remember him as the good man that we knew him to be, one of the last truly good men. Kirsty and Mike both loved Eric Clapton, so it seems fitting to finish with these words. As my soul slides down to die, how could I lose him, and what did I try? But bit by bit, I realized that he was here with me, and I looked into my father's eyes. The poem that I'd like to read is, Daddy and I connected a lot over his time in the Navy. So I thought it would be fitting to read this poem, which I felt it spoke a lot about how I felt about it. So go down to the sea once more, Daddy, for where else would an old sailor be, but riding the waves and tasting the brine, out there on the heavenly seas. And with fair weather assured for every voyage, no storms, no clouds in the sky, and with calm blue waters to sail on, and always bright stars to steer by. A fine sturdy ship to sail in, and revered old shipmates to crew, and with an angel riding the masthead, and land now long out of view. I can't do the last bit, I'm sorry.
What more could an old sailor wish for than to serve as one for evermore? So welcome, old sailor, the tide on the ebb, and it's an honor to have you aboard. Thanks for that, Sandy. Oh, sorry. Shows you how I'm getting mixed up with my nieces. Thanks, Kirsty. Rory, Mike's son, has a few words to say.
Good morning, everybody. It's been wonderful to meet some of Dad's friends and hear some of the stories, and hope to also get to chat with a few more of you later. It's a beautiful poem Kirsty read, and I just wanted to say that Dad cultivated a love for the sea in me as well, and I think you'd be happy to know that we are going to spread some of his ashes in the bluff, and I found my body water, so I'm going to go out with some of my mates that knew him growing up too. So in about 2 weeks, when the sea is calm, we'll take a paddle out and put his ashes out in the back line in the bluff. I thought I'd share, I would like to share a few words about how my dad influenced my life and who I am today. I didn't live with my dad growing up, but it's incredible how much I picked up from him. Mannerisms, value systems, dreams and aspirations, and even challenges like addiction. In my developing years, between the ages of about 6 and 11, I clearly remember my thoughts when determining a course of action. What would my dad do? Was how I thought. Everything I did was weighed against the balance of his example. And in many ways too, our lives ran in parallel. My dad was my rock, my hero, and everything I aspired to growing up. There were some very pivotal moments. One of my earliest memories was sitting in a pub after dinner with my dad. I think we were very young, Kirsty and I. It might have been in Harrismith. Okay. There were three young men, maybe in their 20s, were playing pool. One was very clearly drunk and under the influence, and was swearing and using a lot of vulgar language. And my dad boldly approached him and asked him in a very non-confrontational way and gentlemanly and calm, as we all know him, to please desist from using that language in front of us children. He was very offended and got aggressive. And I was very nervous, because I thought it was going to come to blows. I basically just hid behind his leg. And I remember my dad just stood like an absolute pillar, you know, completely calm and collected. And it was that calmness, I think, that just kind of dissolved the tension of the situation. And this guy calmed down and it was dissolved. This left a very big, strong impression in my mind, a very big lesson in courage and in standing up for what was right, even if it was uncomfortable to do so, but also remaining calm in conflict. My parents were divorced, as you're aware, and my mom, as a single parent, struggled a lot, and sometimes voiced her frustrations about Dad. I picked up the habit from my mom of complaining, and was once complaining to my dad about my mom. My dad turned to me with a very deep gaze and said, "Look, don't be critical of your mum. She's doing the best she can." Well, this small incident left a major big lesson again in my life. Here my dad was the butt of my mum's criticism. God bless her soul, she's just a single mother, you know. I completely understand, of course. But he was uncritical back and understanding and compassionate for her. From that moment on, I never judged my mum. It also had a profound influence on how I see the world. I realized that everyone is just doing the best that they can, including myself. It wasn't so much my dad's words, but how his words matched his actions and his behavior that really had an impact. I really value empathy in my life, and this was the first lesson of it. I once was playing in a pool at a resort when I was younger, maybe about 7 at the time. I glanced over at my dad. It was just me and my dad. He looked forlorn and sad, actually. I came up to him and sat on his lap, and I asked him if he was happy. My dad looked at me and said, "I'm happy if you're happy." This was strange words to me at the time, but growing up, I realized that others' happiness and well-being was intertwined with mine, and I had a duty to others, to step out of my own hardships and make others happy, even if I wasn't doing well. I tried to remember this at all times of hardship, to be like my dad, to always put on a brave face. He was always light-hearted and lightened up other people's load with a smile, kind words, or humor. When I was a teenager, I struggled with addiction. In part, I believe this was connected to idolizing my dad and with his James Bond smooth, charismatic ways, and how alcohol had played a role in that and in his own life. At 15, I was headed for full-blown alcoholism, at a time drinking every single day and smoking weed. Then something happened. My dad gave up alcohol after years of abusing the substance. It gave me the courage and the inner permission to do the same. It is as if he broke a terrible curse for both of us. I still admire him greatly for that. I'm very grateful for having been born in this family. My dad, like my siblings, has always been encouraging, open-minded, even if he didn't understand what I was doing. I once asked my dad in the car what he thought of a particular life decision I was about to make. I'll never forget his exasperated face. He looked at me, he turned to me and said, "When do you ever take my advice?" He gave me the utmost freedom, which had its downsides, but ultimately became one of my major strengths. I really appreciate that about him. My dad's beard was a constant in my life. I grew up in awe of his lion's mane. I always thought he looked like that lion, Willie the Frog, from 80 Days, Around the World in 80 Days. He looked so smart and regal. From the moment I could grow even bum fluff on my face, I wanted to imitate him. And to this day, I can't fathom shaving it off. It is a part of me, as it is a part of him. I had the great fortune of working with my dad in my early 20s. It was at Unichem. And truth be told, I never really knew my dad growing up. We saw him very infrequently. I thought we were quite different. That wasn't until I worked with him. I got to observe him in various roles in the workplace, to observe his character, the words he chooses, his mannerisms, and I realized I was much more like him than I ever thought. I'm very proud of that fact. My dad was a gentleman and a lion. This year, I only saw him 3 times. I drive an old Land Rover Discovery, which, as you can imagine, needs a lot of repairs. And 2 of those times I saw him, it was for him to give me lifts to and from the mechanic. He also gave me some Land Rover shoes, which I'm wearing today. And ironically, he was very excited to give them to me. Finally, the first day I wore them at this big function in Lesotho, they broke. but he fixed them. He got them fixed for me. I miss him dearly, and I only wish that I had more time with him. I know that I know though that his spirit burns brightly, and that wherever he is right now, he's adding value to all the souls that live around.
Thanks, Rory. Thanks for those nice words. We now call on Sandy to say a few words for us.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sandy. I'm Mike's second oldest daughter. And thank you so much for coming today to celebrate his life and to spend some time with us. So, just a few words about my dad. The recurring theme of all the condolence messages that we receive have been that he was kind, generous, and clever. In my life, and for so many other people, he was the precursor to Google. He told me about a man who had a stomach injury which resulted in a hole in a stomach which never healed and was permanently open. It allowed academics to observe and deduce how the stomach worked, the process and the chemistry involved in digestion. I always thought that it was something he'd made up, a modern version of a fairy tale, but years later, when Google was actually a thing, I realized that it was all true. Alexis St. Martin was a trapper who lived in the 1800s, and he was shot in the stomach, and his wound never closed, and it revolutionized medicine. So Dad was the first Google Mike. He was one of the cleverest people that I have ever known. He was incredibly kind and generous. When I was young and very newly married, Karen and Dad came for lunch at our new house in Hilton, and it was the first meal with the parents, for the newlyweds. And our furniture was an old second-hand cane lounge suite that Richard's parents had donated to us. Our TV stand was a rusty tumble dryer covered with a sheet, as you start off when you're newly married. I made lasagna, but I had no idea the pasta had to be pre-cooked before layering it with the mince. And I managed to prepare very crunchy lasagna. It was one of my very, very worst meals, and my family knows that is saying something. Dad and Karen were very gracious. Dad even asked for seconds. And I heard many years later that they stopped for takeaways in Maritzburg on the way home. Kind and generous was my dad. He was also the kind of man who would be there for you when you really needed him. Losing my first husband unexpectedly with 2 small children, living far away from family and friends, I of course said that I was fine, and he arrived the very next day on my doorstep, uninvited, but very much appreciated. He could read the language of your heart as opposed to the language of your mouth, So after a few months on my own in Cape Town, holding on to happy memories and a routine that no longer really fitted my life, I called him in tears one afternoon. I called him in tears at the time of the day when the children were bathed and dinner was on the go and cars carrying people returning from a long day of work were driving past our little house. Thank you. So I called my dad, and he said, why don't you just come home, darling? So I did. My dad was very involved in my boys' lives when they were little. He would go to endless grandparent days, prize giving, Father's Day things at school plays, and he slowly stepped back as my new, much appreciated lover and partner stepped forward. No matter how often I saw him in these later years, and especially because of the pandemic and we were running a very busy business where we saw a lot of people, I didn't see him as much as I would have loved to in the last year and a half, but I could always feel waves of warmth emanating from his home in Ashton. Karen, we are so glad that you and Dad found each other and had some special relationship and such a loving home together. And we've lost a gentle soul who will always be missed. Thank you for coming and for sharing this day with us.
Right. Carl, you up? Carl is going to read some messages that have come through. I would just like to say that the Harvison boys, between London and Joburg, send their message.
This first message I've got is from Willie van Vuren. You must know that Mike and I go back a hell of a long way. I consider him a good friend, although we haven't met physically in a number of years. Mike and I travelled together many moons ago. First of all, we visited England on business extensively, especially the Midlands. We also went behind the Iron Curtain long before the Berlin Wall came down. We took a bus in West Berlin and passed through Checkpoint Charlie, proceeding into the east. We toured East Berlin and were shocked to see how they lived there. The clothes they wore were from the 1930s. Our bus was searched and Rose wheeled under the bus to check that there were no stowaways hanging underneath on our return. Remember, people were allowed into the east, accompanied on a bus by an Eastern guard, but no Eastern person was allowed out. They were basically prisoners in their own country. So yeah, we had some good and unusual experiences. I do also remember in later years when Mike partnered up with Karen that he absolutely adored her. That's Willie van Vuren. This is a message from Len and Libby Eastwood, old friends. Gentleman Mike was his name, a friend who was constant, always the same, always considerate and caring, generous of spirit, always sharing. Men like Mike are hard to find, a most treasured friend who we miss already. His ultimate wish would be that we keep Karen steady. Her sadness will be like tides of the ocean, highs and lows, waves of tears, and all the emotions. We must steer her carefully through her depression and grief, comfort her, encourage her, and hopefully bring her relief. That was Len and Libby. This is from Lance. Today, I know and remember Mike for being a softly spoken, kind-hearted, true gent of a man who touched so many of us in so many different ways. I've always cherished fond memories of family braais, beach cottage holidays, and some crazy times in Harrismith too. But for me, it was Mike's selflessness and considerate nature that set him apart from most others. I'm eternally grateful for the love, support and friendship that both Mike and Karen tirelessly showed to my mom throughout her life, as well as in her final days. Mike, it's been an honour and a privilege to have known you. Sadly gone, but never forgotten. That was Lance. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl. Right. Can I ask Bob to pop up to the lectern here and say a few words about Mike?
Hi, my name is Bob. I'm one of Mike's work colleagues. There will be a number of people at work. It's on the big screen in the boardroom, so the whole thing is going to be viewed by a number of people there. Mike first came into our lives about just under 10 years ago when he approached us to do a range of adhesives under the Galmar brand. And we really enjoyed working with him. He had a great attention to detail, and nothing was too much trouble for him. As a result, we did extremely well and have done extremely well with that range. It's been fantastic for us. A couple of years ago, I decided that we needed to have an export manager, so I asked my daughter who works with me, I think we need an export manager. And Mike was in the office and he was always welcome there. So she'd go and ask Mike. So I said to Mike, I'm looking for an export manager. He said, what about me? And we chatted about it, and I said, go away, talk to Karen about it, make sure you're happy about it. And that started us on a really great relationship with him. Most of the time he was left to his own devices. He didn't have any help, so we had no way to guide him. And he turned the export business into a really, really good business. And I think that we really, really appreciate. For him, there was nothing too much problem. He was happy to travel. Sometimes I think he traveled with Corin to foreign places. He had developed excellent relationships with the people outside of South Africa. And I've spoken to a number of them since then, and they all expressed the same shock and sadness at his passing. When Keith Woodruff, who worked for me, was doing some mentoring for us, he passed away. And we asked Mike would he fill in and help mentoring with some of the buyers. He did it in such a wonderful way. He was patient, he was kind, he was reliable. And also it was apparent in his time with us how dedicated he was to Corin and how extremely proud he was of the rest of his family. My deepest sympathies to Corin and to the children. You've lost a wonderful person. Just like we at Galmar, and particularly myself, are extremely saddened by his passing. Mike, we miss you. We hope to carry on your good work in memory of you.
Thanks very much, Bob. I'd like Sue to pop up and our friend to have a chat about Mike.
Good morning. This is our daughter Lisa, who is my prompt, and my name is Sue. Mike, 1,000 words of praise in one name. Mike. He was warm, special, and caring. We all know that friendships of long standing are truly awesome. Corin and Mike's parallel marriage of love, pride in their children and grandchildren, fondness for travel, and oh so quirky sense of humour was a joy to witness. Mike's reference to Corin as the Queen Mum showed his love and respect for her. The go-to guy in our teenage household regarding projects was always, phone Mike, he will help you. And so he did. We love you, Mike. We love you, Corin, from the Hendricksons.
Thanks very much, Sue. Now we would like, I'd like Sharon to pop up. She's got a speech that she would like, that has come from Tristan.
Hello everybody. This is from my nephew, who obviously grew up with Mark, and this is what he has to say. To Gappa, and he called him Gappa because he couldn't say Grandpa. I don't know where to begin and what exactly to say, but I thought Gappa would live forever, like you always used to say, strong like Russia, or how Russia used to be. I'm going to miss those donkey bites you used to give to Criff, Nix and I remember spending pretty much every weekend with you and Gran. I used to be so excited to finish school on a Friday and wait for my dad to pick me up and take me to Gran's in your house. When I got there, you would always set up pinball or golf on the computer for me. Whenever I was struggling, you'd come and help and show us millennials how to play computer games. I remember going to Spur every Saturday or Sunday morning for food and playing around on the jungle gym. I remember coming downstairs in the morning to Gran, making us our usual jam and toast with coffee, and you either reading the paper or doing your crossword. You were the smartest person I'd ever met, who knew everything there was to know about anything. Gappa, you truly are the greatest human to have ever stepped on the face of this planet. And in my eyes, you were a hero. May you rest easy up there, Gappa, and just know you are missed by so many. I wish I could be there today, but I always have you in my prayers, always. Watch over us, and we will see you one day, Gappa, with all my love. Derek, could I just say my poem?
Yeah, sure.
Because
Yes, absolutely.
otherwise I'm sitting and
Yeah.
coming back up again. So I wrote this poem for Mark, myself. Darling angel, beautiful Mark, how you always emanated light, so gentle and so kind. Memories of you will forever be on my mind. Nothing was ever too much trouble or an issue, and it's with a heavy heart that I will miss you. We didn't get to say goodbye, but I know that with the angels you fly, and I mourn your passing, and I know it's okay to cry. I'll always remember you as a graceful soul. You and my mother made a whole. People who had the privilege of being in your presence would see pure of heart was your core, your essence. There was never a time you wouldn't help, an angel on earth without a doubt. Thinking of you makes me smile, and on this journey of life it will only be a short while until we meet again and get to dance in the rain.
Thanks very much. Nicole, would you please pop up? And I think you're also going to do something for Craig.
Gramps, I'm so thankful you're my grandfather. And I'm even more thankful that I was able to live with you and Gran, and was able to do so many things with you throughout the years, creating the memories of our church forever. I used to get so excited to go to yours and Gran's house as kids. Some Friday afternoons meant having a nap after school and then off to where we went. One of us would always get ice cream with sparklers in it because your Gran had said it was one of our birthdays. I remember you giving us your famous donkey bites and saying strong like Russia. I remember you sitting in our chair with a cup of tea, as you used to call it, and a rusk or two reading the newspaper. I remember being able to ask you anything and you always have the answer. Grams, you were so patient and understanding. Thank you for all the times you helped me with maths and Afrikaans in high school. Thank you for teaching me how to drive and trusting me in your car. Thank you for being there whenever I needed you. And thank you for being the beautiful father figure that you were to me. I wouldn't be the person I am today without you. You're the most amazing person, and we were so blessed to have you in our lives. May you rest in peace. I love you and miss you. Okay, this is from Craig. To all that have made it here today for Mark's memorial service, and those that are online, I thank you for taking the time to share this time to remember Mark Clark. I'm sure Mark would have appreciated you being here, as I do, my mom, Karen, and his children, Kathy in America, Sandy, Kirsty, and Rory, as well as his stepdaughter, Sharon. Myself and Antoinette and the children, unfortunately, could not be with you today due to the travel restrictions, but our thoughts and prayers are with you all. My memories of Mark have always been fond and happy. In the 40 years that he was a part of my life, we had never had a disagreement or words. He was always understanding and always gave me his honest advice and opinion. Mark was always keen to listen to whatever anyone was discussing and gave his thoughts on what was being discussed. He was a man that respected in whatever industry that he worked in, and his knowledge on that industry would never be questioned. He would always get calls on the weekend asking advice on what they should do, and he was always happy to get into his car and go help if need be. I've had a few messages from people that worked with him in the adhesive industry, giving their condolences and saying how he will be missed. On general knowledge, Antoinette and I always said that we needed him at the symbolic quiz nights, as he was a walking encyclopedia. Mark took Sharon and myself in as one of his own children, and for that I cannot thank you enough. We had holidays away. The most memorable was the road trip to Cape Town, and within the 2 hours the aircon broke in his blue Audi 200, and we drove through the crew in 35 plus degrees with windows open. Funny how you remember all the good times. I never got the chance to thank you for taking care of Mom over the last 40 years, especially the last few years. Thank you. It was last Father's Day that I phoned Mike from the UK and asked him if I could call him Dad. His answer to me was it would be my honor son. Unfortunately, I cannot call him Dad anymore, but in my heart, he will always be my dad. Dad is with a very sad heart that we say goodbye to you, but we know that you will be looking over us. You will forever be a part of all of our lives. We miss you. All my love, Craig.
Thanks very much, Michael. All right. We've heard lots from very many people. Is there anyone else who would like to come up and share a tribute to Mike? Thank you. If not, Nicole, I'll call on you again.
I'm sure. My grandson.
Yes. You know, we've been hearing great stories about Michael. The one I can remember, Frank alluded to it, that he was a scout. Well, I was in a rival troop, and we used to get up for shenanigans all the time. And one Friday evening, we were raided by Finland's Sea Scouts. And at the time, we had the commissioner with us, and he was seeing how we were doing our scouting. Now, I'm not sure how Finland's Sea Scouts knew that the commissioner was there and why they decided to raid us that night. But if I tell you that the commissioner happened to be Panga Clark, Mike and David's dad, and here we had these Finland Sea Scouts all arriving, and all they were looking for was, where's Panga Clark? We've got to sort him out. So I'm sure that came from Mike and David.
Memories of Mark, my beloved. My beloved Mark, my husband, my best friend and soulmate. Together for 40 years, we had our ups and downs, but mostly the ups. I thank you for the time we shared, our thoughts, our dreams, and just caring for each other. You're my rock. I so depended on you, especially over the past 4 years, due to my ill health. You were always there for me, giving all the help and support you could muster. Nothing was ever too much. I remember the first time our paths met. I was with my girlfriends having a few drinks, intending to have dinner later. Mike came over to our group and said to me, "Excuse me, but can I buy you a drink?" We spoke endlessly, exchanging our backgrounds and experiences. When we said our goodbyes, he said, "You will see, we will be together for many, many years," and so it came to be. That night was the beginning of our wonderful, interesting journey. I can only describe Mike as kind, gentle, and considerate. He was so very special, and I was so fortunate to have spent most of my life with him. My darling Mark, I will love you forever. Clara.
Thanks, Clara. Right, that concludes. One more. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. No.
So I'm Rod Schaefer. Mark and I had many discussions. We weren't religious people. We kept our religion in our hearts, and I've always believed that I've had angels on my shoulder. And the one story I want to mention about Mark and Clara was one of my many doozies. I was paddling with my young daughter. It was on the last day. We were in a pipeline, and the rapids were full. And I'd taken the line that we put against this pylon of a bridge, and in the river, within seconds, you're in trouble. And we were submerged, I looked behind me, and my daughter Mandy, who was only about 15 at the time, her legs had come through to the front of my where we sit, and I couldn't get out. I was trapped with the impact, and I just thought, what's going to happen? What can we do? The next thing, Mike is standing next to me. Now people, this is in the middle of the Umgani Valley. Access, I'm going back to the 80s when it was a bit dangerous to be down there as well, which you all know about. And there was Mike next to me. Rod, get out. I said, Mike, I can't. And the next thing he had Mandy out of there and me out of there. Mike and Karen always supported my comrades and my duties. And they had, the story goes from Mike, they had wanted to see us on the river, but they had taken the wrong road down from Kloof somewhere and found themselves down. They never knew where they were. And Karen said, Mark, we must get out of here, it's not safe. And Mark's words were, there's something wrong, I've got to get down there to that river, but just have one look. And that was it. Not within half an hour, within minutes, otherwise we'd be in a problem. And that's a story, Karen, I can only share about caring about Mark. My daughter came out from London, the other daughter, to assist on one of our comrades. And I picked up at the, oh yes, that's right, she landed in Johannesburg, and typical daughter, Dad, can you come and fetch me? I haven't got an airfare and I'm going to Durban. No, not a problem. Off I went, picked her up at the airport, and the next morning in the Johannesburg traffic, we were trying to find a way to Durban. And I've always had Ros, my wife, to be my navigator. And poor old Debs, we didn't know where we were going. And believe it or not, we were totally lost. Signposts weren't meaning anything. I remember asking a traffic cop which way to go. His directions didn't seem right. And then, can you believe it? I said to Debbie, look over there. There's Uncle Mike. And in those seconds, we pulled up in the, like 5 lanes, whatever. Mike, how do I get to Durban? Rod, get out of there. It's over there. And that was a couple of 100 meters away. Sorry, Karen. Thank you, people.
Thanks, Rod, for sharing that with us. Right, everybody, thank you very much for attending. The words that have been spoken about Mike, and to the people online, thank you very much for attending. There is tea and coffee and snacks available for everybody afterwards. And please remember Mike, remember Karen, and remember the family. Thank you.